Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Happy Monday. I'm so excited to be a student again with you guys today as we'll have a guest lecture from Marcus, who's an integration coach, a deaf doula, and supports grieving and grief practices. So I'm really happy to hand this over to Marcus. We're lucky to have a more in-depth talk on grief and death than our technique.
Let's try. Let's see what happens. Hi, everybody. Let me just check. Can you hear me in the back? Sort of, kind of, yeah? All right. Okay. Thanks for having me. This is exciting. I'm going to jump right in, basically, because this topic is huge, and we don't have a whole lot of time. So I'm going to come out real blunt with you guys. How many of you guys know? Whoa, not ready. There we go. There we go. How many of you guys know you're going to die? Put your hands up. No? Some of you don't? So is this the first time that you're thinking about this? Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. Is a bit of this topic and how to do it well. Raise your hands if you think there's a good way to die. Is there a bad way to die? We're not talking tragedies here. I'm expecting you to live out your life to the end and hopefully die in a good way. So we'll talk about this a bit today. So today's topic is how to meet death well. Okay. I'm going to try and give you some information today that you're going to have a hard time finding in your textbook. This stuff is more, it's hard to wrap up into a textbook. It's stuff that you're going to find in life. And it's usually information that is going to find you because you're either in it or because you're looking for it, because you're supporting somebody who is in it. So I'm not going to share any data. I'm not going to share any charts. I'm not going to share a whole lot of science. This is just information for you to think about, chew on, and hopefully percolate over the course of your life as you keep coming back to this topic and keep coming back to invitations to think about the fact that your life is also going to end one day. And hopefully by the time it does, you'll know how you want it to. Okay. So the intentions for today is let's have a little bit of time talking about why this conversation is important and why this conversation is really, really meaningful. Obviously, a lot of people have a really hard time with this topic, and we'll talk a little bit about how to kind of approach that with those people today that make it a little bit lighter to have a death that ends well. We'll talk about how to actually meet death well. I'll give you a few pillars on what to think about and how to ask yourself some questions on what it means for you to die well. And then we'll touch a little bit on grief. Grief is a huge topic, so I'll give a couple pieces of overviews and just some foundational pieces to think about and some pillars to talk about when you think about your own grief and obviously as you navigate grief in your own life. And then we'll talk about what you can start doing today to make this less difficult as it starts to approach in your own life. Okay. So this is what I carry into the world. I'm a death doula. I work and teach others how to do death better. So I have a lot of conversations with people who are at the end of their life or who are people who are working with people who are at the end of their life. So loved ones or parents or grandparents. And because of most of us in this culture don't spend a whole lot of time having conversations about how to do this well, it usually doesn't go very well, and it tears families apart, and it usually causes a lot of turmoil and tension and struggle. So I also work in psychedelic therapy. I work with people to prepare and integrate their psychedelic experiences as an integration coach. And when I get lucky enough, the two cross paths where people are using psychedelics to prepare for their end of their life or using psychedelics to open up the gates to be able to grieve those loved ones that they've lost. So this is a little bit of what I do. Touch a little bit more on what I do, but I won't go into it too much. It wasn't long ago that I was in your shoes, chipping away at a kinesiology degree at UBC. And then I spent about 10 years working in human biomechanics, human kinetics, working in health and fitness, and finding all different kinds of pillars on how to live a life that's healthy and fulfilling. And as I was doing this, people kept dying in my life. I've lost friends, I've lost teammates, I've lost mentors. My first death, I was about this tall, and I watched my dog get hit by a bus. And it changed my life completely as I started to recognize that this experience that we're all having here can end pretty quickly. And as I got older, by the time I was in my 30s, I had handfuls of significant deaths. My mother died when I was in my 20s, which was a pretty big blessing and gift, but also very difficult. And somewhere around 22 or so, I had a near death experience myself. And I'll save you the details, but it was horrific. And it took me a long time to start to understand a little bit about what the heck is going on here and what it is that we're working with. So I learned a few things. I learned a lot about the physical aspects of death, emotional aspects of death, and some spiritual aspects of death. And I won't touch too much on spiritual, but I do have a question. How many of you think you have soul? I'm assuming most of you, because this is the way that we're going. So most of you believe there's a soul inside of this body. Yes? Okay. So I will touch on this a little bit. So as I started going through my own near-death experience and started understanding what the heck happened and what happened to my soul in that process, I started learning. I started reading books. I tried to find some textbooks, but I couldn't find any that started talking about this in a way that I was interested. So I started studying sacred death care facilitation. I became a death doula. And for those of you who don't know what a death doula is, it's a birth doula, but for the other door. So I help people exit, whereas a birth doula helps you come into this life. And then I picked up integration coaching and started managing and learning how to help people transition through difficult and transformational times. So when things happen in your life, there's a way to metabolize that. There's a process to go through the metabolism so that you don't get stuck in it and become jaded as you walk and continue to walk into your life. So that's a little bit about me, just so you know who's up here chatting with you. But let's get into this. So we got to define it first. So who's brave enough to throw up a hand and let me know what they think death is? Beautiful, thank you. You Googled this, didn't you? No. Perfect. I love it. Anybody else? I love it. It's perfect. It's the end of an organism's life cycle. So it's true. Death is many things. It is the end of an organism's life. It's essentially for humans the point where breathing and heartbeats and brain activity stop irreversibly. Now, there's more to this in my work because I bring in the soul when it comes to death. It's the moment where the body and the soul separate. Okay? So birth is where the body and the soul merge. Death is where they separate. The body is finite, so it stays here on earth, and the soul continues. And there's ways to care for both of those when your dying time approaches. In our Western world, we're really good at body care. We have healthcare systems, we have surgeries, we have procedures, we got drugs, we got interventions, we got all kinds of stuff to try and make death as pleasant as possible for the body. But we do a pretty poor job of taking care of the soul when it comes to the end of life. So this is a little bit more of my passions and where I cater my work to. But this is what death is. But death is also many other things. Death is just an energy as well. So it's more than somebody dying. So when you think of the end of a day, there's a death there. So we use that, think about a sunset. When the sunset drops below the horizon, the day has died. And the way you know that is because there's absolutely nothing anybody in here in this room can do to pull that sun back up over the horizon. So the death has died, or the day has died. Has anybody gone through a breakup? I know I have. Right? There's a death of a relationship. So the energy of death is present at the end of relationships as well. If anybody's ever had a major identity change, there's a death of the version of you that you were before things changed. Graduation, once you've all graduated high school and moved into university, the version of you that was in high school has died. The moment somebody handed you a driver's license, the version of you that couldn't drive has died. So death is a lot more than just the body expiring. There's an energy that we deal with every single day that I'm hoping to illuminate your awareness to by the end of this conversation today. So you have many opportunities to work with this energy throughout your life. So that by the end of your life, when it actually comes time to die, you're comfortable with this energy and you've worked with this many times. There's a famous Greek quote that says that if you practice dying over and over again, you won't have to by the time it's your turn. Right? So this is kind of something that I want to bring to your awareness today. So why is this conversation important? First of all, the one that's quite obvious is every single one in this room is going to walk through this door. Every single one of us is going to die at some point in your life. It doesn't matter how old you are, how tall you are, how strong you are, how much money you have, race, gender, language you speak. It does not matter. It's the equalizer or the great equalizer. We're all going to walk through this door. So it might be beneficial for some of us to look around and kind of ask each other, how do we do this? We're all going to have to walk through this door. So where are we learning from to how to do this well? All right. The other one, another aspect of why this conversation is important is the way you view your death is going to dictate how you live your life. And if you can't accept the fact that you're going to die, you watch yourself try and avoid it your entire life long. And think about industries that we have in our world that continuously tell us that aging is bad, that you need this to look a certain way, you need this to feel this way. We're always being told that the closer you get to age, or the closer you get to the end of your life, the closer that you get to death, the less value that you have. You look at the way we treat our elders in this country or in this culture. We start to put them away into homes. We start to forget about them. We start to pay other people to take care of them. And there's this underlying context that they don't have any value anymore just because they can't do anything anymore. And that's not the case, right? As we get better at having this conversation and we get better and more comfortable with this idea, we start to become okay with things coming to an end. So if we think about things like the healthcare system, which is a beautiful system, but it has this incessant need to prolong life. We will always try new procedures. We will always try new surgery. We will always try new drugs to try and prolong someone's life. And sometimes that's not appropriate. So we have a hard time actually just letting things be and letting things come to their natural end. The other reason this conversation is important is because it helps us support the dying person or the dying in general. Okay. When we don't get right with death, we try to make it about us. How many of you ever heard somebody say, I can't go see Uncle Tom. I don't want my last memory of him to be in the hospice bed. Right? We start to make it about us because we're quite uncomfortable with whatever it is that death presents itself as, right? And so the last thing that we need to do is make the dying feel abandoned. If you think about it from Uncle Tom's perspective, he's getting close to the end of his life. He's in his last days or his last weeks, and he's looking around and he's not seeing all of his loved ones because they can't come to the bed because they're uncomfortable with what's going on. So the importance of the conversation is so that we can feel comfort with this natural process so that we don't abandon the people that are at the end of their life. Because I guarantee none of us would appreciate it if we were at the end of our life and people started walking out the door. Right? Okay. There are many other reasons that this is really important. If you believe you have a soul, by extension, you believe a few other things. So it helps us understand the soul's journey. Okay. It also helps us open the conversation about ancestors. Whether you believe in them or not, we all want to be remembered. We all do a pretty poor job of remembering. So who are we teaching to remember us when it's our turn to go? So having a conversation about this starts to bring these things into play where we hold more reverence for what happens beyond life. Okay. And it also helps us embrace the archetype of initiation, which is something that we've lost in this culture. We don't do a very good job of initiating a person from one state to another state. So we look around and we see a lot of older people in our culture, but we don't have a lot of elders anymore because we've lost this rite of initiation. So just some extra things that we don't have time to get into today, but this conversation is important and it extends far into many different aspects of how we choose to live our lives and how we experience our life. So, how then do we meet death well? I'll cover a couple pillars. I teach a much bigger course on this that dives deep into all of these things, and we don't have time for that today. So I'll just mention them, put them in your ear. You guys can start thinking about them, think about how they impact your own life. But first, can someone tell me what it means to die well?
Like not being in a bunch of pain when you're dying and also feeling like there's not loose ends that you still need to wrap up while you're dying.
Love that. So she said not being in a bunch of pain when you're dying and making sure that there aren't a bunch of loose ends to tie up before you go. That first part of that question is a very common answer. Most people think that dying well means that you're not in pain. So then you take lots of medications and lots of drugs and lots of things. And unfortunately, the side effect of that is you're not usually very present for your own death. Some people are okay with, but some people are not okay with. Here's another answer.
Still knowing who you are.
I like that.
My grandma chose me because she still wanted to know who she was. She had brain cancer. When she died, she still wanted to be able to look at us when she was going.
I love that. Still knowing who you are. Yeah?
Feeling love
Feeling loved?
and love, I guess.
Feeling loved and loved. Okay. Dying well means you're feeling loved. I love it. Yeah. Being at peace. Ooh, good one. I like this. You guys are smart. Okay. So here's some other things. A good death unites. It doesn't separate. Many people, I'm sure. Well, let's go this way. How many of you had somebody die in your life? More than I thought. How many of you had more than one person die in your life? Okay. Was it a good experience? Was it a difficult, hard experience? Okay. Most people will tell you it wasn't a good experience. And the reason for that is because it separates. And we usually don't know what we're doing when this comes into our life. So we scramble and we're reactive as opposed to responsive. So a good death unites. It creates a village. It doesn't separate. Okay. It also engages as opposed to rejects and denies. Most of us have a really hard time even accepting the fact that this is happening. So we kind of turn a blind eye and we're half in and half not. And we miss things and we try to make it our own. We're trying to soothe ourselves through their experience and it becomes a mess. And that usually the ripples of that lead out into the community aren't very pleasant. So then the stories that we hear about death aren't very good. So then when it's your turn to walk into death, you're preconditioned to believing that this is going to be hard, it's going to be scary, it's going to be difficult, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way if we start to prepare for it and have these conversations now. Okay? A good death also has space for the emotions to be present. How many of you have been told that it's not okay to feel sad? Ooh, I love this. Not many. How many of you told that it's not okay to be angry? Right? So a good death allows for these emotions, plus many others, to be present. And it doesn't try to push any away and try to glorify other ones and try to lean towards others. It just allows everything to be present. Another thing is that it allows the dying to have it their way. One of my favorite teachings is that this is their death. You will get yours when it's your turn, right? And you notice and you can reflect on all those people who've had somebody die. How often do you try to, or did others try to make it theirs? So the important part is we have to have these conversations now so that by the time you get to the end of your life, you can have the things that you're looking for. Okay. And we allow ourselves to give them the gift of having their death their way when they can't advocate for themselves anymore, when they can't raise their hands anymore, when they can't get up. We know what they want and we try to give it to them. Okay. A good death also extends beyond the time of death, which means we grieve their losses, which happens after death. And it means we have funerals, celebrations of life. Maybe we create rituals to keep them alive. Maybe at Christmas time, at Thanksgivings, and all kinds of holidays, we set an extra plate at the dinner table where nobody sits. And that's for our ancestors. So it keeps them alive even past their death. And that teaches us how to remember so that when it's our turn to go, we've taught others how to remember. Okay? So there's a little bit of what a good death is. So if I dive into the 3 pillars, just 3. The first one is acceptance. How do you do this well? You have to accept it. If you don't accept it, you're always going to be wrestling with it. Okay? Now, this one might seem kind of obvious, but it's literally the most important part. So when someone is dying, or you're dying, I encourage you to find ways, however you can, to learn how to accept this. Because you can't influence it if you can't name it. Okay. And the whole idea is that we want to work with this so that we can create this as best as we can for the person that needs it. And you have to be able to accept it to be able to do that. So the turning and facing it is what allows for everything else to open up, for every other conversation, loose ends to be tied, and the peace to be found, and the love to be felt, and all those things don't happen if I'm still going to look the other way. So the most important part is you have to learn to accept it. And so what I hear most people say right off the get-go when I work with them is I don't want to accept this because I don't want to give in. And acceptance doesn't mean you're going to give in. Acceptance means and allows you to actually lean in and start engaging in it, not to give into it and let it walk all over you, but to engage with it and work with it. Okay. It doesn't mean that you have to like it at any point. At no point, at any death that you ever experience in your entire life, do you ever have to like it. Acceptance doesn't mean you need to figure out how to like it. Acceptance says, I'm going to cooperate even though I don't like it. Because I understand that this energy is way bigger than any of us. It's going to come. It's going to take you, whether you like it, kicking and screaming, or whether you go willingly, it's going to take you. So it's your choice to see how you would like to engage in this so that it happens as smoothly as we can possibly make it. Okay. One of my favorite examples of this is that it's like a sunset, right? It's like I said earlier, there's nothing you can do to pull that sun back over the horizon. Death is the same way. There's nothing you're going to be able to do to reverse this. You can try as much as you can, but we all know everybody that's had a cancer will eventually die of cancer, right? So there's nothing you can do. So you might as well work with it and engage in it in a way that creates some healing. So the second pillar is set an intention. Most families are torn apart with death because they have no common ground to come back to. So the intention is like creating a through line for you to come back to and weigh all the difficulties and the options and everything else against. So if there's a specific intention for this death, it helps make things more cohesive between all of the family members. Most family members don't do this. So then the mother wants something different than the aunt, and the daughter wants something different than the son, and the brother wants something different. And everybody thinks that their way is the best way, and their way is the way that this person would want it. And if they could speak, they would want it this way. And there's these disagreements and all these other things, and we start to forget the fact that this isn't about us. This is their death. And so if we set an intention around this, it provides something to come back to when things get difficult. Does that make sense? Yeah? Am I losing anybody? So, okay. The last piece of this is rituals and ceremonies. Now, don't let this freak you out. A ritual is something that makes big on the outside what is big on the inside. It's that simple. Okay. So it can be a small gesture, it can be a big gesture, but it allows us to stretch a moment so we can be in it longer. Okay. This is any kind of gesture that allows energy to flow. So a classic example of this is like if you spend your whole life going to the summer house on the lake. You spend 2 weeks in summer every year on the lake, and now you guys gotten older and you don't want to go on anymore, but you're going to go one more time with the family. And as you close the chapter to the summer house, you and the family walk through every single room and you spend 10 minutes and you all share stories and your favorite memories of that room. When you're complete, you walk to the next room, and then you walk into the kitchen, you walk into the living room, and maybe you walk out inside, and you go to the boathouse or whatever. And what that does is allows everybody to feel the closure that's happening and experience the change that's coming. Excuse me, I'm fighting this flu, so pardon me. So we do this all the time. We do this with birthdays, funerals, baby showers, weddings, birthdays, celebrations of life, baptisms, any kind of religious thing. These are all rituals. And all they do is try and help people move from one phase to another phase. So what I'm here is to try and do is convince you that this thing that we do with these events is also appropriate to be doing for the end of life. and after the end of life, after somebody has died. Okay. So what do we ceremonialize? We ceremonialize big transitional moments. Okay. So when grandpa is now at a place where he's got to give up his driver's license, maybe there's something that we can do as a family that ceremonializes this handing over of the license. And remember, all it does is allow you to stretch a moment to be in it longer. And the reason for that is when big transitional things happen or transformational things happen, it stuns the soul. So you're all sitting here on Monday afternoon in a classroom. God forbid this hasn't happened to anybody. But if your dog died on Friday and you're here on Monday, there is a part of you that's still sitting in Friday. Okay. Life keeps moving, but the soul stops in big transformational, shocking moments, especially in death. So if anybody's had a parent die or somebody significant, it takes a long time to come back to who you are. And so what a ceremony or a ritual does is allow you to be in it longer so you can go back and find yourself on Friday who's grieving your dog and bring them to Monday so that you keep moving forward with all parts of you. And as you guys get older and you start walking through life and you start noticing 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds and 70-year-olds, you'll start noticing that there are 70-year-olds out there that still have parts of themselves sitting back at 5 and 10 and 12 and 17. And those are the people that are still stunted because they've never given themselves time to go back and actually be in the trauma or the intensity of whatever transformational moment happened. So spending time creating a small ceremonial space to grieve your losses or just reflect and be in it is one of the most important things you can do when you're going to try and meet death well. Okay, this is the same thing when you are noticing that your end of your life is coming. Spend time creating little rest ceremonies, remembering different stages of your life, and remembering different moments and different milestones so that you can keep moving forward without starting to get jaded. It's the same thing we do for birthdays. The other place to ceremonialize is lasts. I hear this all the time that it's grandma's last birthday. You got to make sure it's like every other birthday and let's pretend like it's not any different. That is so disrespectful to the process of what's going on. It's not the same, so don't treat it the same, right? Make that birthday unique. It's her last one. We all know that she's not going to make it to next Christmas. Let's make this Christmas different. Let's let her speak a little bit differently. Let's let her reflect a little bit differently. We're always trying to keep things exactly the way that they always are because we're so uncomfortable with potentially looking at something that is going to happen to all of us. So it's a great place to also ceremonialize is these lasts or these big surgeries or the big news. If any of you remember, as your loved one was dying, the hardest time is the waiting between surgeries or the waiting between appointments or the waiting between tests. Those are great places to come together and spend some time reflecting. Okay, so as you go through all of this, you're going to feel a lot of this if you allow yourself to, but you're going to feel a lot of grief. And grief is a very beautiful energy that is very difficult to learn how to be with, but it takes a lot of courage. Okay. But grief is the natural emotional response to loss. Okay. We feel this all the time. It encompasses many emotions like anger and denial and despair and guilt and love. And one of my teachers used to say, if I can't metabolize what shows up at my door, then I have to live very strategically to avoid the encounter with my life. So, meaning that if I can't handle the bad news or the shocking moments that show up in my life, I have to start shutting off valves so that I don't feel those emotions, but I don't go towards those experiences. And over the course of a few years and a few decades, you're going to notice you only got one or two avenues to live life through. And they're usually not joy and love, they're usually crankiness related. Okay. So, grief blocks the heart. This is why you want to feel your grief. Okay, so part of today is just to give you permission. If you're grieving something, please create a little space for yourself and feel it because it will block your heart over time. Okay, every preferred emotion has a blockage. Okay, safety is blocked by fear, pleasure is blocked by guilt, okay, sense of self is blocked by shame, truth is blocked by lies, and love is blocked by grief. So we need to feel our grief. We need to be able to learn how to become practitioners of grief so that we get better. Your grief and your suffering is going to be riddled all through your life. It's just the nature of life. But if we continue to push it away, and pretend like it's not there, and stuff it down, and not move with it, and not work with it, it will come back, and it will take some time to work through it. So my mom had enormous amounts of grief. She was hurt by many people many times in her life, and she never spent any time working through her grief. And the lungs are the organ that store grief. So what did my mom die of? Lung cancer. So she never spent any time grieving. So she built up this energy in her body her entire life over and over and over and over again. And because she could feel the intensity in her lungs, she started smoking over and over and over again. And eventually that energy culminates into something that we call cancer. Okay? So we become grief stricken. Okay? And it becomes this energetic mass that sits in our body that then creates dis-ease when it goes unacknowledged. So it's about sitting down and taking the time to feel your grief as these dying times come, and as these transitional moments happen. And grief starts to build itself when our death comes or when a loved one's death comes, because the first piece that you're going to feel is when you hear the news that they have cancer. You're going to feel grief. Oh, it's stage 4. You're going to feel grief. Okay, well, I need to go into hospice. You're going to feel grief. So we get opportunities to work with this our whole lives. And if we don't, we become grief stricken. So you can see this. Have you ever seen the grumpy old man walking down the road that's got such a strong scowl on his face that he doesn't even know how to smile anymore because the muscle doesn't work anymore? Okay, that's grief stricken. And if we don't process our grief, we lose the capacity for joy. And this is what most people will deal with if they don't know how to work with this energy. You will shut off the valves to joy because you don't know how to get past the grief. Okay? The valve opens both ways. Always. You cannot be more sensitive to pleasure without being more sensitive to pain. Okay? You won't love something that you won't eventually grieve. And you'll never grieve something that you didn't love. So my example here is I have a 3-year-old dog, Mowgli, Black Lab. And every time I look at my dog, I feel a sense of love. But because I work on this, I know that the more I let myself love my dog, the more of a hole he's going to leave when he dies. Right? And the courage is to continue to love him, even though I'm continuing to build my pain when he finally does die. And because I'm practicing working with energy like grief, I get better at processing grief, so I don't shut off my valve to love. So anybody that you love in your life, I encourage you to think about it from the other perspective. How big of a hole are you going to leave in your life when they're gone? Because everything in your life will leave you. Everything. Whether that's your death that finalizes it, or their death, or its death. Everything is impermanent, which means there's a death coming in literally everything you're staring at right now. And if we get better at that process of grieving, we're not scared to let ourselves be open to love. Okay? So one way to increase our capacity, I hear this all the time with clients that I work with, is I want to just be able to love more. I want to be able to love more. I don't know how to access more love. And one of the ways that I approach this is you let go of the love, you start working on the grief. Because you're only ever going to let yourself love to a level that you're comfortable grieving at. You're never going to blast through love, because when that love is gone, you're going to feel a certain level of depth of grief. If you're not comfortable down here, you're never going to let yourself love at this height. So one of the ways to get better at loving and being more open to loving and feeling love and letting love in is to get good at the opposite. The valve opens both ways. Right? So now what? Where do you start? There's a few places you can start, but the first one is do your own work around this. Start to get really clear on what it is you want at the end of your life. Start to get really clear for the fact that you are going to have an end of life. So what is it that you want? Who do you want around? What kind of place do you want to be What kind of music do you want to listen to? What kind of people do you want around? All kinds of things, right? These are things you guys start thinking about over time so that you get to have what you want at the end of your life. Okay. I watched a video yesterday of a lady who said, if I die with a bra on, I will come back and haunt everyone. Right? Right, exactly. I can't necessarily relate to that. I've heard stories, right? So we get comfortable and more clear with what we want at the end of life. And as you get more clear, you'll start to get really clear on what you can control. Some of it you won't be able to control, but you'll be able to create what you want. So do your work around this. Ask yourself where you've learned about all the things that you know about death. Because most of it has been conditioning from the media or movies or horror stories from friends telling you about how their loved one died. They're conditioning, they're not ours. You get to decide how you want to work with this. Okay? Communicate about it. It's the second piece. So for those of you who still have grandparents, talk to them. What do you want at the end of your life? When you can't speak and ask for things anymore, what are the things that you want? How can I help? Talk to your parents. Same thing. What do you want? How can I help provide this for you when you get to the end of your life? I know it's coming. Now, you might have these conversations with people, and they might not be willing to have the conversation back with you. And that's okay. But you're planting a seed, and they might never have been ever asked in their whole lives about what they would like at the end of their life. So give it some time, let them plant the seeds a little bit, right? And they might come back to you in a few weeks and say, hey, I've never been asked that question before and I wasn't ready for it, but I've spent some time thinking about it, and here are some things that I would like at the end of life. And I promise you it will make things a lot smoother and a lot more loving. And when you reflect back on it after they've died, you will feel much better about what you were able to provide for them. Okay? The third piece is don't look away. Okay? If anybody's ever brave enough to let you watch while they are dying, don't look away. It is one of the greatest teachings that you will ever receive from anybody. And our death is our last great teaching. So most of us, when they're at the end of life, we say like how we don't want to be seen that way. We don't want to be in, I don't want anybody else around. I just want my husband and my daughter there. The markings of a good death, or one of the markings of a good death, is that it's a village making event. You make it big, not small. And in our culture, we make it small. And that doesn't teach anybody anything besides how to fear it and have more questions about what the heck is going on behind closed doors. The only way we're going to learn about how to die is by watching people die. So if anybody's brave enough to ever let you watch, don't look away. Find a way to be there and be in that energy and watch and just pay attention and take notes. Because one day you're going to need that information. Right? And then the one that I love the most is honor the everyday deaths. There are deaths happening all the time, every day around you. And if you get more comfortable noticing them, or more aware, or better and more skilled at noticing them, you'll feel more prepared when your time comes. So, how many of you had pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving? What? Like three people? Okay. Well, yeah, that's not a good example. Let's go this way. Have you ever had one of your favorite meals and you're eating it really, really quickly, and you get down to the last bites and you take the last few bites and you feel that sense of like, oh, I wish there was more. That's grief. That's a death. There isn't more. If you start to notice that, there's a death there. Right? When it hits 12 o'clock, the morning has died. You can notice that. Right? When you go to bed at night, the day has died. You can take a second to honor that. When you spill spaghetti sauce all over your favorite shirt and you gotta throw your shirt out, that shirt has died. You can notice that. You start to notice these endings in life, you start to get much better at having capacity to be with endings. And you've got, I don't know, anybody been on vacation? It's up there, yeah, vacation. And vacation comes to an end. Notice that there's a death there. The vacation's over. Right? If you've ever had an experience, you're going to a party. Gosh, you guys are partying all the time, I'm sure. You drink a beer. You get to the end of your beer, that beer has died. take a moment to honor that, right? Conversation, good hangouts, good friends. You ever had a really good hangout with a friend and you're sad that it's over? There's grief there. There's a death there, right? And as you start to notice this, you'll start to be able to recognize when the end is coming while you're still in it. And that's presence. And that's gratitude. And that's being able to be in the moment. When you start to have a really good experience and you notice yourself in that experience, and then also notice that this experience is going to end. And now you can be in it even deeper. And you can enjoy it even more, as opposed to grasping for more of it when it has already ended and then feeling the pain of not being able to bring it back. So this is practice over and over and over again. And you have an opportunity to do this multiple times a day, every single day. Okay. Final thoughts. Death doesn't mean you any harm. Okay, so let me throw this. Does anybody still here watch Family Guy? Is that totally outdated? Oh, a couple people? My goodness. Okay, there's a character in that show, Death, walking around. He's in lots of episodes, cracks lots of jokes. There's nothing harmful about him. He's doing his job. Death is the same way. It doesn't mean any harm to you. It's just doing what it does. Every tree, every animal, every plant, every person, every living thing you've ever seen, death is going to come from that at some point. Not because it's malicious and not because it's out to get you, because that's just what it does. Okay? And so it doesn't mean you any harm. But it's how you relate to it that's going to dictate how you experience it. If you don't have any good awareness or any good tools to manage it, it's the first time you ever thought about it, you're going to have a hard time with it. But if you recognize that I can handle this, I know this is natural, I know how to show up for this, I know how to meet it well, I know how to ceremonialize it, I know how to be with my grief, then you can just let it come through, do its thing, and you don't get affected the same way. You can actually find some gratitude for a lot of it, which is a bit of a twist. Okay? It's like emotions. If you don't know how to feel sad, anytime you're sad, you're gonna have a hard time. But if you're good at sadness, then sadness doesn't bother you nearly as much. It's not sadness's fault. Sadness is just doing what sadness does. Death is the same way. It's not out to get you. Right? And the last one, as I've talked about a couple times already, is nothing is forever. Everything is impermanent. Everything will die. Everything that has a life to it will come to an end as well. So learn how to recognize that while you're still in it. You'll start to be able to appreciate it for the moment and for the thing that it is. All right.